Babies are born in hospitals and homes every day. Each bears a genetic heritage. Each possesses traits of parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and countless ancestors. And yet each child is unique. Each is a combination of traits. Never before have such combinations existed. Never before have the genetic constellations that define their bodies found expression. Based simply on physical appearance, about the only way to tell an infant boy from an infant girl is to look at their genitals. Along with the other parts of their reproductive systems, their genitals are not essential to the survival of their bodies. They are like dormant buds that ultimately will allow these children to reproduce. They exist to complement each other. Young children grow and develop at a rate that, at least to their parents, is amazingly fast. They quickly become aware of differences between boys and girls. Both pass through a phase when they are not at all interested in the opposite sex. As growth and development inevitably continue, and the years pass, these feelings will also pass. Profound changes begin. The children take on forms that are much less like each other. This time of life is called puberty. No one knows exactly how puberty starts, but we do know that the driving forces of the change are chemicals called hormones, and that the changes begin in the brain. Under the brain's influence, the pituitary gland begins to produce hormones that enter the bloodstream. Eventually, the hormones will reach the primary sex organs. In a male, the primary sex organs are the testes, suspended outside his body in a sac called the scrotum. In a female, the primary sex organs are the ovaries, located inside her body. The ovaries and testes react to the pituitary hormones by producing their own hormones, which travel throughout the bodies of the children. In males, hormones produced by the testes will cause the voice to deepen. They will cause hair to grow where it hardly grew before. They will cause certain of his muscles to develop, giving him masculine contours. They will affect him in a variety of rather unimportant cosmetic ways. But most important, they will cause his genitals to grow and develop. When boys are going through the changes in puberty, there is sometimes a release of fluid called semen during the night. This is commonly called a nocturnal emission or a wet dream. This is a natural occurrence and only means that more semen has been created than can be stored or reabsorbed by the body. A mature male has two fundamental roles in the reproductive process: to produce sperm and to deliver these sex cells into the female's reproductive tract. Sperm cells are created by the testes, which hang outside the body because sperm creation depends on the organs being slightly cooler than the rest of the body. At first, the cells from the testes contain the same amount of genetic material found in other body cells. Through a series of cell divisions called meiosis, that amount is cut in half. Finally, the cells become sperm. A typical sperm cell has a head, which contains the genetic material, a body to provide energy, and a tail, or flagella, to propel the cell. Sperm are produced at an amazing rate, about 200 million cells every day in an average adult. The sperm will be carried by a system of tubes that leads up into the body. Several other glands that produce the rest of the semen connect to this system. Also joining is the urethra, a tube that comes from the bladder. Finally, the tube exits the body's interior, surrounded by the penis. The penis is made of soft, sensitive tissues. It serves as a conduit for urine and for the delivery of sperm when maturity is reached. The penises of some men look like this, and some look like this. At birth, boys have a fold of skin, called the foreskin, surrounding the tip of the penis. Many doctors believe that the foreskin makes the penis more susceptible to infection and remove it at birth. This is called circumcision. If left on, it does not interfere with the male's ability to deliver his sperm into the female's reproductive system. To deliver sperm, the penis must temporarily change. Inside it are chambers of spongy tissue. When the male is sexually aroused, blood vessels that supply the chambers open wider than usual. The tissue fills with blood. At the same time, some of the veins that normally drain the chambers are partially closed, and the organ becomes stiff and erect. The male cannot urinate when his penis is erect. The tube that leads from the bladder is shut off so that no urine can pass. In this rigid state, the penis is ideally suited to deposit sperm into the female's reproductive system. When the male is no longer aroused, his penis returns to its usual state. When a girl starts going through puberty, there is a very marked happening, the beginning of her menstrual cycle. A girl usually has her first period sometime between 10 and 14 years of age, sometimes later. For many girls, their first period is an important signal that they are really growing up. In fact, it is one of many steps to adulthood. The hormones that the female's ovaries begin to produce at puberty will cause her breasts to develop. The hormones will cause hair to grow where it hardly grew before. They will change the shape of her body to give her feminine contours and a structure adapted to the delivery of children. And they will cause her to begin menstruating. What exactly is going on during the menstrual period? Why does it happen? And what is it for? To answer these questions, let's examine the tasks of the female in reproduction. She has three major roles. One is to produce ova, the female sex cells. This task is performed by the ovaries. Another task is to receive the male's sperm. This is done by the vagina. The third task is to provide an environment for growing a new human. This environment is the womb, or uterus. The menstrual blood comes from the uterus. Its appearance is the most obvious part of a complex cycle of events that is essential to reproduction. Because the cycles of a young woman are very often irregular, we will describe a typical cycle of an adult. The menstrual cycle is controlled by hormones and has two important aspects. One is the development of a mature sex cell, an ovum. Unlike the male, the female already has all her sex cells at birth, although they are immature and rest dormant in her ovaries. Both ovaries are filled with hundreds of thousands of follicles, each containing an immature egg cell. First, the follicle surrounding an ovum grows and swells. It migrates to the edge of the ovary, forming a small bump on the surface of the organ. It begins to undergo meiosis, the series of divisions that will reduce its genetic material by half. Fluid rapidly accumulates in the follicle, and its walls become thin. About 2 weeks into the cycle, the follicle breaks, releasing the ovum. This release is called ovulation. The ovum is transported down a passage called the fallopian tube, which leads to the uterus. Meanwhile, under the influence of hormones, a fine network of glands and blood vessels has developed on the wall of the uterus. If fertilization takes place, the egg will come to rest here. But usually, no fertilization occurs. In that case, this newly created network breaks down and is discharged to the outside as the menstrual flow. Watch the calendar on the side as we go through the cycle again. Day 1 is the first day of bleeding. This menstruation lasts 4 to 5 days. Day 6 through 13 shows the follicle growing and swelling in the ovary until around day 14, when it breaks. Within a few days, if the egg is not fertilized, it dies in the fallopian tubes. Any remnants will be washed down into the uterus, and after approximately 28 days, the cycle starts again. The menstrual discharge flows out of the body through the vagina. The vagina is a muscular canal that leads from the uterus down to the external genitalia. It receives the male's penis and sperm. Some women have a fold of thin tissue called the hymen that covers all or part of the opening to the vagina. During rigorous physical activity or at first intercourse, it may break and bleed slightly. In front of the vagina is the urethra, leading from the bladder to the outside and through which urine passes. In front of this is a small, very sensitive bulb of tissue called the clitoris. Surrounding all these are 2 pairs of skin folds called the labia. Although a young girl's body may now have the capacity to become pregnant, it is really not ready to bear children. A very high proportion of prematurely born babies come from teenage mothers. A number of years must pass. Years of physical development, years of mental development, before people are completely mature. As this happens, they become more and more interested in the opposite sex. When people are mature enough to raise children successfully, they may choose not to. There are several ways of preventing pregnancy, but eventually, the couple may decide that it is time to have a child. Sexual arousal is an intensely personal, complex process involving many psychological and physical factors. The external genitalia of both sexes are very sensitive to touch, and they provide sensations of pleasure that are important to the sexual act. When the female is sexually aroused, the walls of her vagina secrete a fluid that lubricates the canal, making entry of the penis easier. When the male is sexually aroused, his penis becomes erect. Early in his arousal, a small droplet of fluid secreted by one of his glands cleans the way for the sperm. This drop may actually contain good sperm. If just that drop gets into the woman's reproductive system, she may become pregnant. The penis is inserted into the vagina. This is sexual intercourse. The partners move their bodies so that their sex organs rub against each other, heightening the sensations of pleasure and sexual excitement. Ultimately, each partner may reach a sexual climax called orgasm. For reproductive purposes, the climax of the male is particularly important. It is then that muscular contractions force a sudden discharge, or ejaculation, of semen into the vagina. Well over 100 million sperm cells are normally ejaculated at once. Each of them contains half the genetic information required to make a human being. Once inside the vagina, the sperm are moved along by muscular contractions of the woman's reproductive organs and under their own power. Their tails propel them forward. The rest of the semen serves as a nutrient to give the sperm energy. Of the millions of sperm that are ejaculated, only about 100 will make it as far as the ovum. Some will be killed along the way by the natural defenses of the woman's body. Some will run out of power. Some will be functionally defective. It is not fully understood how they are guided, yet many of the sperm move up into the uterus and then into the fallopian tubes. The sperm may live for about 48 hours, so that if an ovum is already in one of the fallopian tubes, or will be within 2 days, fertilization may take place. That moment, when one of the woman's ova unites with one of the man's sperm, is the single most important event in the reproductive process. The resulting fertilized cell is smaller than a grain of sand, and yet it now contains all the genetic material needed to guide the construction of a new, unique human being. We have learned much about reproduction by studying other animals, such as this fertilized mouse embryo. Immediately after fertilization, the cell changes in such a way that no other sperm can enter. Soon the zygote, as the fertilized cell is called, divides to become 2 cells. And then these divide to become 4. Then 8, 16, and so on. From conception throughout the pregnancy, hormones will maintain the conditions that nurture the developing child. As the cells divide, the embryo continues its journey along the fallopian tube. About 1 week after conception, it reaches the uterus, which is prepared to receive it with the network of blood vessels and glands. By this time, the embryo has become a fluid-filled sphere of nearly 100 cells. Some of the cells become finger-like projections that anchor the embryo to the uterus to draw nourishment and oxygen and to rid the embryo of wastes. The anchoring cells secrete a hormone that will prevent the disintegration of the lining. There will be no menstrual period. 3 weeks after fertilization, though still smaller than a grain of rice, the embryo has a primitive heart. Through the following weeks, its tissues and organs will develop. In 4 weeks, it looks like this. 5 weeks, about the size of a pea. 6 weeks. 7 weeks. At 2 months, it is called a fetus and is obviously human, though only the size of a gumdrop. When the embryo attaches to the uterus, a complex structure of vessels and cells forms, which is called the placenta. A network of the embryo's blood vessels closely intermingles next to the mother's blood supply. While their blood doesn't actually mix, materials such as oxygen, nutrients, and waste products can pass between mother and child. If their blood were to mix, the embryo would be rejected as the foreign organism that, in fact, it is. Don't forget, it shares only half of its genetic constitution with its mother. From the placenta emerges the umbilical cord, which leads to the abdomen of the fetus. When the cord is removed at birth, the belly button is created. During pregnancy, the placenta and umbilical cord serve as pathways for everything the fetus needs to grow. By the 3rd month, all the organs of the fetus are essentially in place, and it enters a period of intense growth. During the 4th month, the fetus doubles in size. Its muscles twitch. By the 5th month, it is nearly 21 centimeters long, about 9 inches. It kicks occasionally. Its heart beats about 140 times per minute, twice the speed of an adult's. The fetus pushes against the walls of the uterus, and the uterus expands to accommodate. The mother becomes very visibly pregnant. The fetus usually rests upside down in a curled position. If born at 6 months, the fetus would have a slim chance of surviving, even with meticulous medical care. By 7 months, it has increased in size by half as much again to 12 inches. Meanwhile, the woman's breasts have changed under the influence of hormones. They have begun to produce milk. Finally, at about 9 months, the uterus descends into the cradle of bone formed by the pelvis, so that the fetus's head rests on top of the birth canal. The uterine wall, which is quite muscular, begins a series of contractions that is the onset of labor. When contractions of the uterus become stronger and closer together, the woman is ready to deliver.
It's gone. Next one.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Under the influence of hormones, the opening of the birth canal dilates or widens. The fluid-filled sac that encases the fetus breaks, and the fluid it contains flows out. This is called breaking the bag of water. The final stage of labor may last for several minutes or for many hours. The contractions force the infant down the birth canal. Normally, it emerges from the vagina head first. Finally, with pushing from the mother's abdominal muscles, the baby is born. The mother will also have to deliver the placenta, now called the afterbirth. But the new baby is now on her way to growing up just as her parents did.
Ready to go. Ready to go, baby. You have a smashed nose just like Leslie did. Hello, baby. So cute.
Her eyes are like her mother's, her nose like her father's. She has hair like her grandfather's, and hands like her grandmother's. She bears a genetic heritage, and yet she is unique. She will change her parents' lives forever. She must be fed and diapered and loved. Someday, perhaps, she will meet a young man, and they will fall in love and have children of their own.